Hey everyone, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am Aaron Freeman, founder of FileFans.com, joined by my good friend Scott Karasik, who is a writer for ProFootballSpot.com, covers the Falcons. We are back once again to talk about our favorite football team, the Atlanta Falcons. This week we'll talk a little bit more about Julio Jones' contract now that we have sort of parameters to discuss. We will do our position-by-position breakdown. This week, we're talking about the cornerbacks. And as usual, we will answer your mailbag questions at the end of the show. So, Scott, training camp is almost here. We got, 10 days as of this recording. And sort of the expectation is, this is the magic hour, I guess, where if Julio is going to get a deal done, it'll probably, things will probably start to ramp up over these next 10 days since the Falcons have, had a history of signing guys like the day before training camp starts. So maybe we'll have some good news. Do you think now that these Des Bryant deals and the Demaryius Thomas deals have been done, you think that helps facilitate that to happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sets his market almost perfectly at that what was it, $70 million a year over 5 years, $14 million. You're going to do a 5-year extension, so you can add more new money. Have it be a 6-year, $85 million deal. So it looks like a slight raise, and then Julio's camp is going to sign up on that in a heartbeat. The only question is, should you really give him that much money? And personally, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it on this show before. In principle, I don't really believe in overpaying wide receivers, but I do think, when you have a guy like Julio, who's as good as Julio is, and who is as pretty much clean as Julio is, then there's really no reason not to give him all the money, and especially when you have a Falcon team that, needs, that is, they don't have somebody else who they can just, turn the keys over to the offense to right now. Maybe that's Tevin Coleman in a couple of years, but until that day happens, it's all Julio all the time, so pay him. There's really no other option.
And it kind of sucks that it's like that, but I'm perfectly fine with seeing Julio Jones make a shit ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, he makes watching the games exciting. I mean, it's the same thing with Calvin Johnson. Like, if Calvin Johnson didn't play for the Lions, they'd be, pretty dull to watch these last 8 years. So, Julio's been that way for the Falcons the last 2 years, definitely. So, as a fan, I'm all for paying him, and so I get the opportunity to see him play on Sunday.
Exactly. You want a guy who's going to make it to where you never feel like you're out of the game. And Julio Jones does that. You never feel like the Falcons are completely out of the game, because at any time, Julio can just go off and destroy somebody.
As we saw last year. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's it. So, you think he'll get the exact same amount as Des Bryant and them, or you think he'll get you said, they'll do it 6 years, so it looks like it's a slight raise, but do you think even if he signed like a 5-year deal, you think he'd get like 75 and 50 million guaranteed or something like that?
I mean, personally, I would do, let's see, if it was up to me, you'd see at least a option bonus, a signing bonus, the first 2 years of salary, and then like another $3 million in the third year. So it'd be like, hold on. So it'd be like 47 guaranteed. But they were like 45 guaranteed.
Okay.
Just because I think you can make the argument that he's more important to the offense than Des Bryant is in Dallas or than Demaryius Thomas is in Denver.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with you. I think both of those teams, I know the Falcons are moving in that direction, but they haven't made that move yet. But both of those teams are running teams. So you can make the argument that whoever is their running backs is their most important player on their team. And, maybe there will be a day where Devontae Freeman or Tevin Coleman is that for the Falcons, but it ain't today. So, I can agree with that. Like, if I was guessing where Julio's contract would come in, I think he'll get about $15 million a year. And I think he'll probably get about $48 million guaranteed when all is said and done. So that's probably where I would guess where his deal will come in. But, if we get in for less than that, then that's kudos to Dimitrov and, whoever is negotiating that contract. And
Nick Polk negotiates the contracts.
There you go. I always forget who it is. You should know who the guy who negotiates contract because it's like offensive lineman. If you know who he is, then he's probably not doing a good job.
Then he's probably not doing a good job?
Yeah, I mean, why would you care about the negotiating guy? It's like if he's doing his job, then you don't even notice it.
No, I only know who it is because I heard my boy Greg Linton bitch about him to me all the time. He's like, man, that Nick's an asshole. I'm like, what's so bad about him? He goes, he's trying to make us take this 1 year, $1 million deal again. I go, oh, that's just him looking out for the team's best interest. I go, that's all it is. He's a good contract negotiator. He's kind of a dick, but he's a good contract negotiator.
Okay. I'm just saying for, your average fan, you probably shouldn't know it. But, if you're talking to agents, then that's a different way.
Basically.
All right. So you got anything else on this Julio contract? You want to jump into the cornerbacks discussion?
Just that my projections are slightly less than what you were thinking because I'm thinking like 14.1 a year and like 47 guaranteed, but we're on the same page there. He's going to get paid.
Yeah.
He's going to be a very happy man, and Mama Julio is going to be a very happy mama.
Very much. Very much. All right, let's talk about these cornerbacks as we do each week. Or at least we've done the last couple of weeks, is break down a different position group. We'll talk about which guys we think will make the roster or what sort of impact certain guys will have. I think it's pretty obvious to almost everybody, no real disagreement here, that the top three cornerbacks are going to be Desmond Trufant, Robert Alford, Jalen Collins. I know when we drafted Jalen Collins, there was some discussion that Robert Alford's starting job was in trouble. I think you probably see it the same way I do, Scott, but officially, do you believe that Alford's got to worry about his starting job?
Coming out of training camp? No. Maybe by week 8, week 10, if Collins is starting to pick up the game and Alford just regresses, then I could see it. But right now, I think your top three corners, no matter what happens throughout the season, are going to be Trufant, Alford, and Collins. That's where your investment is. That's where your talent is. Obviously, Trufant's a top 5 corner in the game today. There's no question there. We don't really have to say much about him. He's going to be the left cornerback. He's instantly going to be the number 1 corner in the Falcons. Now I could see a situation where Dan Quinn says, hey, Trufant, you're shadowing the number 1. Alford, Collins, you guys are the outside guys. If Trufant has to move inside. Worst case scenario, Trufant's on the number 1 outside, and then you have Collins on the inside. I don't trust Alford as much inside as I do Collins, because I think Collins has that range. He's got the hip flex and the range like a safety normally does. Where Alford does better when he's got a sideline he can push guys into.
I agree. I think if you're looking at probably if you were looking at all three of these guys and say who has the best skill set to play inside, I think Trufant is the guy. But obviously, if he's going to be stuck on outside playing left corner, where he usually is going to cover the number 1 guy, then between Alford and Collins, I'd probably agree with you that Collins is probably better suited to play inside. I agree with you on maybe Trufant shadowing the number 1 guy, probably only on a handful of matchups. Like I think Dallas is a team where Dez Bryant usually lines up on the left side of the field as opposed to the right side. But most teams put their best receiver on the right side of the field. So usually Trufant is going to be covering the number 1 guy most games. But teams like Dallas, I think, are sort of the exception to that. And then that would be a situation where you'd be like, yeah, let's maybe not have him shadow Dez the entire game, but let's give him a couple of opportunities to give Robert Alford a little bit of a break.
Well, why not just do what they did against Jordy? They had Trufant shadow Jordy all but like 4 plays last year, and it worked out really well and limited him. Those 4 plays, he wound up getting deep on one of them against Ishmael. But still, most of the time, Trufant did a great job against Jordy Nelson. I don't see why you wouldn't put him against Des Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you look at the receivers. I feel like it was Antonio Brown and one other guy that gave Trufant some issues last year. But other than that, he pretty much –
I want to say it was Steve Smith.
Okay. Yeah, I remember it was somebody in the first half of the season that gave him some troubles. But it was like basically other than that, he pretty much contained or locked down every guy he faced. So I'm not concerned about whether Trufant can handle Dez. Obviously, Dez is so good that he'll get his, but I think he can, go toe-to-toe with Dez and do a pretty good job. I think Alford is going to benefit from playing in a scheme, but I don't necessarily know if he'll hit the ground running early in the season, facing some guys like Dez and other people that early on where you can basically say, oh, yeah, he'll – Dez will only catch 4 passes for, 40 yards or something. Yeah, I don't know something that often, but
it was Jarris Wright. Outside of 2 long completions, one was against Jarris Wright and one was against what's his name? Blanking right now. Antonio Brown. Trufant had a great season.
Yeah.
And that freak Mohamed Sanu pass to whoever that was to, that no corner could have gotten to. That was just a freak pass. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, I've completely forgot about week 2 or whatever that Bengals game was. So that's so long ago. That was back when there was actually optimism for the Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Back before the line fell apart.
Yep. Good old 2014. Scott, let's talk about some of these other corners. I feel like someone asked us last week about how good we thought Jalen Collins is going to be, so I don't necessarily know we had to talk about what we think he'll do as a rookie. But some of these other corners, it's basically 6 guys competing for probably 2 roster spots. Would you agree?
Yeah, 2 spots.
So I guess who do you think, if you had to put money on any of these guys to emerge, who would you expect to be at least maybe the top 3 guys for those 2 spots, or the 2 guys?
Well, I think Desmond Southward's going to be guaranteed a roster spot just because of how good he is as a gunner on special teams. That, to me, with Keith Armstrong having influence and him having the potential to be a really good corner in the scheme, that, to me, makes him worth keeping because he's got the athleticism to play it. He could be a very good dime nickel corner in the scheme. Or a corner safety, because what they do is they like having a big corner match up against the tight end. That's a big thing that they did all the time. Brandon Browner was always on a tight end. And I think Desmond Southward could be used in a similar way to Browner. Big physical receiver. Just put Southward on a man-to-man and match up. Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, those kind of guys, just put Southward on them and hope for the best. It's a better strategy than it's worked, and it's been a better strategy than what we've seen from other guys and from other teams that putting linebackers and safeties on these guys. Put a big physical corner on these guys and have them work.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not as sure that Southward. I do think he's probably, compared to some of these other guys, got a better shot than average. I guess my issue is with Southward is I think him and Akeem King basically fill the same niche on the team. They're both converted safeties that don't have a ton of cornerback experience, that both have upside to be really good special teams players, but I think they're really at best number 4 corners. even if they develop. And I don't know if they're going to be those guys this year, but we'll see. And I think between probably if I was betting, I'd say Southwood makes the team and King makes the practice squad. But I don't really see a scenario where both those guys make the team. So the guy I'm really looking forward to seeing how he performs is Kevin White, because I think of those 6 guys, including Phillip Adams and Michael Lee and Jonathan Mincy, as well as King and Southwood, I think White is the most talented, has the most upside. I could see White being, not even like a rich man's Kevin Mathis, a long-time nickel cornerback in the NFL. And I think he's the guy that I think could really sort of, if he has a good summer, really sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, I guess, shock the system and sort of leapfrog up the depth chart to that number 4 spot and knock a guy like Phillip Adams, who I think basically, because he's the only guy that has actual NFL experience at cornerback, probably gives him a slight edge over some of those other guys, just because you don't really want some super, super green guy being a twisted ankle away from, being our nickel cornerback. But, I'm looking forward to seeing what Kevin White does, basically, bottom line.
I saw Kevin White in Mobile. He was by far the best corner there all week. By far. I don't know how he went undrafted.
Yes.
He's small and he's slow for a corner. But Kevin Mathis was small and slow for a corner too. I really like Kevin White. I agree with you. It wouldn't shock me if by the end of the season Kevin White was the starting nickel. It really wouldn't. But it would also mean someone's getting injured.
Yeah, that's always a real possibility. It was surprising to me. I thought he was going to be a 4th-round pick. So when he didn't get drafted at all, that really shocked me. Because I know at some point people were talking about him being a top 3 round, top 100 guy. So hey, we got a good one. So kudos to the Falcons.
And I had a 3rd-round grade on him. I really liked him. I still don't understand how some of these guys go undrafted. But I don't know. Maybe I miss. And then some of them that do go undrafted, they end up doing really well. But Akeem King, I don't think he was worth the draft pick. I would have rather seen them take Kevin White with that draft pick than Akeem King.
I can't dispute you. Kevin White, I think, is far away a better player. I think, King is basically a special teams guy. I think that's really his role with the team. And that's why I don't think Southwood's a lot, because I think if they felt like Southwood was a lot, they wouldn't have drafted Akeem King, because to me, he's basically the same player that Southwood is. Not as good, but you're basically taking a slightly raw Desmond Southwood.
I think with where Akeem King was picked, they basically said, you know what? We really like this guy, but we know he's going to sign with some other team if we don't take him. So let's get a shot. But right now, I think it was a wasted draft pick. I kind of thought that on draft day, though. I also thought the Jake Rogers pick was a wasted draft pick.
Okay. I think both make the team is basically because they were drafted, not because they're going to be the best players. I could be surprised. I could be wrong about that, but I can't really dispute you. I would have put an undrafted grades on both of them.
Well, I mean,
but
Jake Rogers is still better than Tyler Columbus.
Well, there you go.
So if it comes down to them two for the final tackle spot, I know who I'm rooting for.
So I know these last 2 guys. I've seen a little bit of Mincy. I haven't seen anything of Michael Lee. I know that during Mincy was getting some reps with the first team defense, if I'm not mistaken. So I know when we signed him, there was talk that he was going to move to safety, but then he was working at cornerback. So what are you thinking about his odds? Is he purely a practice squad guy, or could he kind of shock some folks and sort of fly out of nowhere and make the team?
he wasn't. He's perplexing because he should be so much better than he is. He just doesn't look like his body matches what his mind is trying to do.
Okay.
He reminds me of an early Chris Houston.
Oh, okay. I get that now.
You know, his feet are going in the right direction, but his head is going in the wrong direction. So that's what I'm like. That's why I'm coming up with that comparison. He's got it focused. He's got it focused. His hands are on the guy, and then he loses them. Just he needs to put it all together. If you want a developmental backup, he's a practice squad. He's a good, solid practice squad guy. If you want a guy who's going to actually impact your team, you're probably looking the wrong way. And Michael Lee is a pure camp body. Pure camp body. Absolutely useless as a football player.
Okay. So I'm guessing, Scott, if you're picking the 5 that you think are going to make the team, it sounds like you're picking Trufant, Alford, Collins, Southward, and White.
Yes.
Okay.
And I like Phillip Adams, but I just don't like him better than any of the other guys.
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed with Phillip Adams. I thought he was pretty bad for the Jets, but then again, every cornerback the Jets put on the field last year was pretty bad. So I don't know necessarily if I can, throw Phillip Adams too much under the bus for that. And, the one thing you can say that the Seahawks brought him back twice, 2 different times. He didn't make the team either time, but obviously they liked him enough to sign him twice as a free agent. So, to me, I think Adams, the one thing he has going for him, he's actually played in NFL games. He's actually covered quality NFL receivers, not particularly well, but I mean, he's gone against guys like Eric Decker and Keenan Allen. So, unlike pretty much everybody else, other than maybe Kevin White, where you could say he's gone against that caliber of wide receiver and one-on-one with, all the receivers top receivers he played in college. So I think that's what Adams has going for him. He can play special teams. So if the team is basically like, we don't trust any of these other guys, they're all young and they're all green, then I think that's probably Adams' best shot at making the roster. But I'm not really expecting him to come out, like his hair is on fire and play to just take a roster spot. I think he just kind of wins it by default if he ends up sticking.
You know how sometimes you bring in a guy for camp just because he knows your roster or knows your playbook, knows what's going on, knows how to explain it to the guys, but he's really not worth a damn. I think that's what Phillip Adams is. I think that's what Alan Bradford is. I think that's what Jared Smith is. They're guys who are smart and probably future coaches and probably high-energy dudes, but have mediocre to little NFL talent.
I can't really, dispute you on that one. So, yeah. So, Scott, you think there's a chance that one of these 6 guys behind the top 3 don't really have a great summer, and the Falcons go out at the end of training camp when the cuts come and sign somebody off the street?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the Seahawks roster right now to see who they might sign. Richard Sherman obviously isn't getting cut, and Will Blackman and Kerry Williams obviously aren't getting cut. But say Jeremy Lane or what's the guy's name? Thorold Simon have a rough summer. I could see Thorold Simon getting cut. And the Falcons going, you know what? This guy's better than, Kevin White for our scheme. And he's only 24 years old. And he's a 2-year pro. And he's got he's done some stupid things. But it's not, kick him off the kick him off the roster kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Seahawks roster too. Marcus Burley would be interesting just because he played a lot of nickel for the Seahawks last year. And if he got cut, then obviously because the Falcons don't have a clear-cut slot corner on the roster, because Collins and Alford and Trufant are all primarily outside corners, but they can play inside in a pinch. But I wouldn't call any of them slot corners. If the Seahawks cut Burley for whatever reason, I don't know if that's likely, but he would be an interesting pickup. I know they traded for him last summer, so
you know what's funny about that situation? If Burley got cut by the Seahawks, brought in by Atlanta, he would reunite with his old college teammate, Paul Warlow.
Yeah. There you go. That Paul Warlow name drop.
Oh, man. Life is a circle. I don't know what that means, but
Okay. All right.
It makes sense.
Watch The Lion King. Circle of Life.
All right. Mailbag?
Yeah, mailbag. Let's do it. All right. We got a question last week that we missed, but it meshes up perfectly with this week's topic. Raekwon Gilbert asks, where do you rank Desmond Trufant among the rest of the league? Presumably he's talking about cornerbacks.
Ooh. Fifth.
I was looking up mine. I had him at 6, just because the guys I have ahead of him, I have Revis, Sherman, Joe Hayden, Vontae Davis, and Chris Harris. Those are the only guys I put ahead of him.
Revis, Sherman, Hayden, Chris Harris, and who else?
Vontae Davis.
Vontae Davis. I have Vontae Davis behind him. That's the only one of the 5. I have Revis, Sherman, Harris. What was the other one?
Hayden.
Yeah, Joe Hayden, and then Trufant.
Yeah, I think the reason I give Hayden and Davis and Harris, obviously Revis and Sherman are 1 and 2, whatever order you want to put them in. But I give Hayden and Davis and Harris a little bit more credit than Trufant at this point, just because they've been very good for a little bit longer than Trufant has. But I do think when you look at that next group of players, if you were going to cut it off at 5 and then go to Trufant, I think Trufant is up there with guys like Xavier Rhodes and Aqib Talib and other guys like Brandon Flowers and other guys that are really, really good corners. And I think Trufant's probably the best of that group. I'd probably put him and Rhodes above the rest of that. And I think, within another year or two, I think we'll see Trufant sort of keep climbing up this list. And so there's a real possibility that by the end of the season, I might vault Trufant up to 3 behind Revis and Sherman. And Revis is getting a little older. So, there may be a point, next year after, he might be number 2 behind Sherman. And so I think the sky's the limit with Trufant. So, 6 is not a slight.
I agree there.
All right, Scott. We got agreement. Maybe this next question we'll disagree. Pro Football Central asks, did we do the Falcons Mount Rushmore yet? So we're going to do Mount Rushmore. I think we did this, I feel like we did this a month into when we started this back in 2013. So I guess we'll just update it. I don't remember who we picked back then, but I don't know. I kind of have difficult with this just because, am I picking guys that are iconic Falcons, or am I picking guys that had the best career as Falcons? Because it would be pretty much a pretty different list. If I was picking guys that had the best career as Falcons, I'd probably pick Claude Humphrey, Mike Ken, Matt Ryan, and Jesse Tuggle. But if I was picking iconic Falcons, I'd probably pick Tommy Nobis, Deion Sanders, Jamal Anderson, and Jesse Tuggle. So Tuggle's probably the only guy that I would put on both lists. But,
see, and I'd go a little different route, because I'd even throw in an owner, because I feel like a huge shift happened with the Falcons when Arthur Blank bought the team.
It's a fair point.
So I'd put Arthur Blank. I'd put Deion Sanders. Again, most icon. I would go with the most iconic Falcons. So I'd go Arthur Blank, Deion Sanders, Jamal Anderson for the Dirty Bird, and then Jesse Tuggle. Just because he was the reason that defense throughout the 90s was as good as it was. He was the captain, the leader, the big cheese, if you will.
The big kahuna, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those, it's kind of like what's your criteria sort of thing. I think we've talked about Mike Kinn before. I think he's probably one of the most underrated Falcon players. I think no offensive lineman other than Bruce Matthews played more games than Mike Kinn in NFL history. So, I feel like he needs to be up there just to get the recognition that I think he deserves. But, it's not sexy to put a left tackle on your Mount Rushmore. So I get why probably most people wouldn't even think about him.
I just don't think that he was one of the most iconic Falcons.
No, I agree with you. He's not iconic at all. You're not like, oh, man, when I think of Falcons, I think of, the 14 or 17 years that Mike Kinn played with the Falcons. No, you don't think about that. But it's one of those things where I think if you're looking at players that have probably the strongest resume to be in the Hall of Fame, other than Claude Humphrey and Tommy Nobis and Deion, of course, I think Mike Kinn is right there with those guys, even more so than Jesse Tuggle. So it's one of those things where I just think he's underrated. That's all I'm saying. Underappreciated.
Definitely underappreciated Falcons. Definitely, if you're doing a Mount Rushmore of underappreciated Falcons, he's right at the forefront of that one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of somebody else who's underappreciated.
I'm going to go with Jason Snelling.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. I knew there was a running back. I just couldn't think of who it was.
I'm going to go with Bob Christian.
That's a good one.
Because without Bob Christian, Jamal Anderson isn't Jamal Anderson. He even said that himself. He said without Bob Christian and those big fat guys in front of him, he would have not been anywhere close to as good as he was. That line was surprisingly good. Bob Whitfield, Ephraim Salaam, Calvin Collins.
Yeah. They got the job done. Get Jamal to the second level. That's what you got to do. That's what an offensive lineman's supposed to do, and the running back takes it from there.
And they were a smaller line for their day, too.
I recall Gene Williams being pretty big, but other than him, I think you're right. I think he was pushing
Robbie Toback. Oh, man, I forgot about Robbie Toback.
Other underappreciated Falcon that doesn't get enough respect because he single-handedly caused the Falcons to break their streak of not having consecutive winning seasons. Chauncey Davis blocking that kick against the Jets allowed them to go march on the field and win that game. And that was the only reason they were 9-7 in 2009. So Chauncey Davis is on my Mount Rushmore of underappreciated Falcons.
Chauncey Davis. Yeah.
All right, Scott, let's get on to the next question. All right, at Fonzie 1988 asks, how conservative/aggressive do you think Falcons or Dan Quinn's coaching style will be?
You know how conservative Mike Smith was? Think not the exact opposite, but pretty damn close. I mean, yeah, his defensive style is going to be pretty conservative. He's not going to blitz all over the place, but he's going to make sure that they've got enough pressure coming from that front four. He's going to have great coverage schemes. And if they don't have pressure from that front four, he's going to start sending 5 and 6 like he did in Seattle, because he trusts his defensive backs to play well in coverage. And I think in Atlanta, he might have more natural talent at defensive back than he had in Seattle while he was there. Because I don't think Byron Maxwell has more natural talent than, say, Robert Alford does.
I would say I would agree with you at corner. I don't necessarily would agree with you at safety, but okay.
Well, safety's a different beast,
All right, yeah.
but I think he's got the type of player he needs at free safety in our boy Roberto Allen.
Okay.
Roberto Allen. Sorry, Ricardo Allen.
I like Roberto.
It's been a long day. I got into a car accident yesterday, and I've been dealing with State Farm all day, and I've not been wanting to do that.
Okay, well, I hope you're doing all right. I hope your car is doing all right.
No, my car's basically screwed, but I'm doing okay.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. You know, don't want to have to start having to chaperone you around or whatnot. How conservative will Dan Quinn be? I think it depends on what you mean by conservative. Is the Falcons going to be, are they going to run the ball a lot more on offense, which typically people consider conservative? Yes, under Kyle Shanahan. Are they going to be a little bit more vanilla with their schemes compared to Mike Nolan? Then yes, defensively. If you're talking about is he going to, be going for it on 4th and 2 all the time? I really don't know. We'll see. They passed the new PAT rule or whatnot. I've already forgotten what it was now. Are they going to go for 2 every time? I hope so, but I don't know. So I guess he'll be, in certain ways, he'll be much more aggressive than Mike Smith, but in probably other ways he'll be just as conservative, I guess, in terms of, being a team that runs the football and plays good defense. I think that's what they want to be. That obviously, I think that's what Mike Smith wanted to be. They didn't really do a good job being that team after 2010, but I think that's sort of the same flavor of team that they're going to try to build in Atlanta. So,
I think you said it best.
We got another one from at Fonzie 1998. This one is for Falc fans. That's me. If you had your choice for GM, who would you choose? Or if you were GM, how would you manage the team? I guess we'll let Scott answer this one as well. But I think the 2 best GMs in the league are Ozzie Newsome and John Schneider. Probably Ted Thompson would be 3rd on that list. So I guess if I had my choice, I'd probably take John Snyder and then Ozzie 2nd. So that would be my choice. If I was the GM, I'd probably manage the team very poorly. I guess I don't know. Like, how would I manage the team? I wouldn't pay Sam Baker, $40 million. I guess that's a step in the right direction. I don't know. I'd probably be a lot quicker to sort of move on from a lot of draft picks, probably than the Falcons have historically been. Like certain guys, I'd just be like, okay, I'm good on Peter Collins. I'm good on Desmond Southworth. Let's move on. That sort of thing, as opposed to, which is more in the John Snyder sort of mentality. So that's probably why he'd be number 1 for me. That'd probably be the major change. But in terms of hits and misses, it probably wouldn't be that much different. I don't pretend to be a genius or anything like that. I just think some of the mistakes that Dimitroff and company have made were pretty dumb mistakes that good GMs don't do, but that's me.
All GMs make mistakes. Every single last one of them makes mistakes. The Seahawks are one of the lower percentage drafting teams out there. What makes them so good at drafting is they always have 12 to 13 picks. That's honestly what makes them so good at drafting.
I agree with you. All GMs make mistakes. I don't think all GMs make bad decisions. Like, obviously, the Seahawks aren't perfect. They thought at one point in time Charlie Whitehurst was their franchise quarterback. I look at the Ravens. I don't see any like blatantly dumb decisions. Like the worst decision Ozzy's probably made in the last 8 years was dumping Anquan Bolden probably 2 years too early. But other than that, you don't see the Ravens making boneheaded decisions. So, I think the difference between Dimitroff and some of the better GMs in the league is a lot of his decision making, you're sitting there like, this is not a good decision. You don't need hindsight to be able to tell some of these decisions, which I think people probably, who follow me on Twitter have heard me say ad nauseum at this point. But I don't know. It just, you can make mistakes. Like, I don't have a problem with them drafting Pere Jerry and then him not working out. I have a problem with them deciding to keep Pere Jerry for like 5 or 6 years when he clearly was a marginal NFL defensive tackle, and you let guys like Vance Walker go. Like, that to me is a dumb decision. Like, you can't justify that in my mind. But that's the Falcons for you. So.
Well, that decision was more about money than anything else.
It should have been about football than anything else. Vance Walker, Pere Jerry, it's but hey.
They had a number on Vance Walker that they felt he was worth. He thought he was worth more. And it was a pride issue because he actually had a higher number from Atlanta than he did from the Raiders at the time, but he took the Raiders offer because he felt like his pride was stunted. Same thing happened with Curtis Lofton.
Well, if I was in Vance Walker's shoes and they wanted to keep Pere Jerry, and I was the second best defensive tackle on the team for 3 years, and they continued to rotate me behind Jerry and Corey Peters, my pride would be hurt too. So I don't blame him for that. So that's less on Dimitroff. That's more on Mike Smith and how he plays guys. But
yep,
same old thing.
Wait, so you're agreeing with me that Mike Smith was the problem for something?
Oh, I think Mike Smith had his issues. I just don't think they suddenly emerged in 2013 and 2014. I think they were long-standing issues. Like Vance Walker not playing was an issue back in 2010. But, it didn't hurt the team then because they had, Babineau and Abraham and Grimes, et cetera, covering up for the fact that, they weren't playing their second-best defensive tackle for 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
All right. You got anything else to add about this GM question, or you want to move on?
The thing that makes your boy Schneider such a good GM isn't his player evals, isn't his scouting staff. It's that he works with his head coach to get the players in the mold of what his head coach wants. So when there's a collective vision, something that you always mention, hey, we don't have a vision for this team. We don't have a vision. We don't have a plan. When there's a collective vision of this is what we are doing, this is how we go get it, this is the player I want because he fits this, this, and this of what I'm looking for. When you've got that collective vision going on, which the Falcons have right now, that says everything you need to know. And I think after this year, when Scott Pioli goes and gets a GM job elsewhere, and the Falcons start winning a lot more games, and the vision still keeps going, as long as the Falcons don't try to do a quick fix and they stick to the process, that was the issue of what happened with Mike Smith. Those first 3 years, it was all about process, all about process, all about process. After those 3 years, there was not a word about it. Well, it's about vision here. If you have a collective vision, you've got the way that you can win games, and you stick to it, I think they'll be fine. And I think you might be singing a different tune on Dimitroff and his evaluations, because he had a ridiculous draft this year.
He did.
And he had a good draft last year, outside of the Prince Shembo pick.
It was okay. I don't think it was a great draft. I think compared to some of his other drafts, it was a great draft. But I think it was a pretty ho-hum draft, if you ask me. But yeah, I think the other thing that Schneider does, and Carroll gets credit for this as well. I don't think they, I think they give up on. They move on from players. Like look at Percy Harvin, look at John Moffitt. Look at Matt Flynn and Russell Wilson. They're not afraid to basically say, yeah, that guy we just gave $10 million to, we're moving on. We don't need him. He's not good for us. And that's something the Falcons, historically haven't done. Just look at the last year's free agency as a perfect example of that, where the guys who they paid a lot of money to were getting outplayed by, second and third string guys in training camp. But, they ended up cutting some of those guys. So, hey. So I give credit to the Seahawks. They operate the right way, I think. But let's move on. Blogging Dirty asks, 5 players from the Falcons you would build a franchise around. Take age into account. 2 offense, 2 defense, and 1 rookie.
5. 2 offense, 2 defense, and 1 rookie. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones on offense. That's easy. On defense, where it gets tough because there's Trufant and then there's a whole lot of crap.
It's hard to say that there's somebody else. Oh yeah, he's a cornerstone of my defense for years.
Yeah, I don't see a cornerstone I like Hageman, so I'm going to go with Hageman and Trufant there, and then the rookie's obviously for me going to be Vic Beasley.
Yeah, I mean, I think Beasley would be the second defensive player. If you didn't have to, I think he's the obvious pick for the rookie class. It's hard for me to dispute those picks. I think obviously Trufant, Julio, and Matt Ryan are no-brainers. I think you kind of have to go with Hageman just because there's really nobody else that's entering the prime of his career that you would sit there and say, oh yeah, he has the potential to be a really good starter. Maybe Grady Jarrett. But if we're taking top 5, regardless of where they play, I think the answers are Matt Ryan, Julio, Jake Matthews, Beasley, and Trufant. I think those are your big 5 cornerstone players, and that's the foundation of the team for the next 8 to 10 years.
I'd agree with that.
You throw Hageman 6, I guess. Him and Nasamoa.
Well, that's just because you're not a believer in Hageman, but we already knew that.
No, it's not that I'm a disbeliever in Hageman. I think he's been a little bit overhyped a little bit. The Richard Seymour comparisons. I don't see him on that level. Seymour's a future Hall of Famer. He's not on that level, but I think he's a good player. I think he can be a good player. I think he'll be a starter for us for many, many years, a productive starter. But I don't necessarily see him as this sort of overwhelming force that's going to take the league by storm that some people build him out to be when we drafted him. That's all.
I saw him more as a Marcus Stroud.
Okay. I think that's probably a better, more accurate comparison of where he's going to be down the road.
That excellent run defender who gets 5 to 6 sacks a year in his prime and gets a lot of pocket collapsing pressure and gets a lot of passes deflected because he's just super tall and has long arms.
Yeah, that's fair. I compared him to Red Bryant coming out. I know people think that's like a slight, but Red Bryant was like the 6th best player on like the 6th best defense of all time. So that's not saying he's a bad player. That year, 2012, 2013, Red Bryant was really good at football. So that's not a slight to Rashid Hageman to say if he can be Red Bryant instead of doing it for 2 or 3 years, he can do it for 10 years. Then that's a great career.
That's Marcus Stroud.
I think Stroud was good for about 6 years, but yeah, we'll go with that.
I mean that's really almost exactly what Marcus Stroud was.
All right, at Big Boy Brewski asks, out of all the free agents we've acquired, who do you guys want to make the 53-man roster?
That's a really big question.
Yeah, is this asking us like who is the guy we're rooting for most out of all the free agents we signed to make the team, or is it like name the 8 guys that we signed that we think will make? I don't really understand the question. I'm confused.
I mean, I'm just going to list my top 3 guys that I hope make the team out of the free agent signed and that I hope to have starting roles because I like them. Adrian Claiborne, Justin Durant, Brooks Reed. Those are the top 3 free agents right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably go with Durant, Tammy, I probably will say, I want to pick Schofield, but just because Chris Chester is going to be responsible for keeping Matt Ryan upright, I'm gonna slip him in as my third guy. $100 million man. So keep him clean, Chris.
Yeah, I hope Chris Chester does well too. Now that you mention it.
I hope that answers your question, Bruce. I don't know if that's what you were looking for. I want all the guys to make the roster, but yeah.
Some guys I'd rather not see make the roster.
I mean, some guys I don't really have an opinion on. Like, I'm not like rooting for them, but I hope all of them play well enough so I'm like at the end of the summer, like, oh yeah, Jared Smith, he was great. He was killing third string defensive linemen in preseason. So, I don't know.
I mean, I want them all. Yeah, if our third string is looking so good that you're just destroying everybody, that's a good sign. I'll agree with you there. But that's a sign that coaching is doing what the hell it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last two questions come from Evan Birchfield. His first one is, Aaron, can you talk about Dwight Freeney and how he would fit in Atlanta? I would like to move. So, Evan, that makes two of us. All right. I've been pimping out Dwight Freeney on this show the last couple of weeks. I think he'd be a perfect fit as a situational rusher, playing that role that I think most people expect Schofield to play this year, as the guy that comes in on third downs opposite Beasley and basically just just gets after the quarterback. I think Freeney can still do that. Obviously, he's not the same player he was many, many years ago. He's a future Hall of Famer. I think he brings some veteran leadership. I think, he has perfected the spin move. There will be a wing in Canton dedicated to that highlight clip of him just, putting spin moves on Jake Long and Dwayne Brown and pretty much every left tackle that played in the AFC the last decade. And I think, he can teach Vic Beasley how to do it. And I think it's you get a pass rusher. If he doesn't work out, 1 year veteran minimum deal, no big deal. If he does work out and gives you, 4 or 5 sacks this year, then who's going to complain about that? So that's why I like Freeney in Atlanta.
You know who's going to complain about it? Croy Bierman, the man who's going to be out of a job.
There you go. I think a lot of people would welcome that.
That's who he's going to complain about.
Well, I had a bad Kim Zolchak joke, so I'll just let it go.
Ray Zolchak? Yes, I know.
Last question from Evan is, would either of you want to see us get new uniforms when the new stadium opens, or keep the current ones?
With what Nike has been doing, I'm going to go with no. Unless we can get a guarantee that they're not going to go stupid on us. But I have a feeling that they would just go so ridiculously dumb that, I'm going to go with a no. I don't want to see new uniforms. I don't want to see anything crazy. Just stick it out with these uniforms, or go back to the old ones, or go back to something similar to the old ones but with the new logo. But right now, you're fine. The uniforms are fine.
To be honest, I've never been a real big fan of the current uniforms. They've had them since like 04, I think it was. I'm partial to the all black, the 90s, that's when I started becoming a Falcon fan in the 90s, when they were black and with the silver pants and whatnot, black helmets, all that stuff. And I'd be much in favor of just an all black home uniform or whatnot. I think they're probably due for new uniforms by the time 2017 rolls around. Again, if they switch uniforms in 04, then that'll be like 12, 13 years with the old uniforms. And by then, time for a change. New era, whatever you want to call it. So I wouldn't be against it. I don't want anything too fancy or exotic or anything like that. Just keep it simple. Stupid. You know, all black. That's what I'm in favor of. So
All black everything.
all black everything. So when they turn out the lights in the dome, people disappear.
Like the Miami Sharks.
There you go. I need some Willie Beeman.
Oh no, let's not.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's our show this week, guys. Sorry for the bad jokes. But we're waiting for training camp. So we got one more show and then training camp starts?
One more show and then training camp starts.
So next week we'll do our position breakdowns of the safeties. We'll throw in special teams on top of that. I'm sure that will take the entire hour of the show to talk about, Josh Harris and his great snapping prowess. People hit us up on Twitter. I'm at FalcFans. Scott is at Scott Karasik. Check out my stuff at falcfans.com. Scott is now writing exclusively for Pro Football Spot. The show has its own Twitter handle. That's at Falcons PFC. And use the hashtag Falcons mailbag for any questions you may have. It's easier for us to find them that way. And next week we will be back. And, the week after that, we can finally actually talk about actual football. So it's back, folks. Rejoice.